All right, what's up, my friends? Welcome to my complete set review for Phyrexia. All will be one.
We are the Borg.
That's what's up. All right, let's get completed. I didn't spell that wrong, so it's how they do it. I'm not illiterate. Thank you. So we're doing every single card, constructed, limited. We did white already. If you missed it on YouTube, go watch it. Now we're doing blue. We're gonna go over all the cards, give out our rewards, do our usual stuff. I want to remind y'all. First off, get your pile driver jersey. Call us Barrel Nut Shop. Promo code Jim 10% off your order. Custom jersey, mad high quality. Check that out. This is my Worlds jersey. I got two because I wanted to get a commemorative Worlds jersey for Worlds. Check it out. Call us Barrel Nut Shop. Also, we got 10 new brews coming up next week, February 2nd. 10 new decks. Gonna be a lot of fun. Some creepy ass shit there, right? We got the that. We also got the Pile Driver pre-release, which is gonna be on the 11th. That's in the Discord, free to play for my subscribers. If you're a Pile Driver, get in the Discord and play for free. Again, free prizes, free to play. Saturday, February 11th. Are we ready to go here? All right, let's get here with our first card here in Aspirants Ascent. 1 mana for an instant. Common. So on a turn, creature gets +1/+3, gains flying and toxic 1. So kind of like your typical weird little limited combat trick. They always try and add more and more words to these to make them more playable. This one's not bad. +1/+3 is not terrible. Flying's not terrible. The toxic 1 part is a little weird because, like, typically, I mean, I guess if you want to just push damage, this can just, like, get you that third counter for toxic, which is kind of cool, but feels mostly irrelevant for a card that will usually be played on a creature that's blocking or blocked to win a combat, obviously. And the flying, similar idea, where it's mostly just reach on defense. But if you know me, if you watch my Bronze and Mythic series, you know I love 1 mana tricks, honestly. And the toxic cards definitely make you want to block them. So this card does a good job of, like, well, they really want to block your 2/2 with their 2/2. Now you 1 mana trick, get up on value, play a 2-drop and say go. So I think this card's going to play better than it looks. I do like 1 mana tricks. I think it's a fine limited card. I would not take this early, and I would not play a lot of them. But this is a card I think you're pretty happy to have the first copy of in your draft decks, assuming you're somewhat aggressive. I would not try and use this on defense. And then giving flying and toxic might, give you that jump it up for the win on your 5/5. Or again, it might get you that third toxic counter for corrupted, because I think getting to corrupted is going to be one of the most important parts of the limited format for sure. So definitely a playable card. Not the most exciting card, but definitely I think pretty playable. Up next is Atmosphere Surgeon. 2 mana for a 2/1 uncommon Phyrexian wizard. If you guess a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on the Surgeon. Again, oil counters are just a type of charge counter with a fancy name, and they do things. And this one has remove an oil counter, give a creature flying at sorcery speed. So pretty good card, honestly. Assuming you're playing enough non-creature spells where a 2/1 for 2 is fine, and then if you can get a counter to them at some point, you can make things flying later in the game, which is kind of cool. It's not great, because it's the kind of card where, like, it's a 2-drop you don't necessarily want to block or attack with early, but you just can if you want to. And then later on in the game, you can give things flying out of nowhere as well. You can go, like, turn 5, play this, play a spell, jump a thing and attack, which is kind of cool too. So pretty solid card. Not going to play like a normal 2-drop, but you can just play it like a normal 2-drop if you want to. So solid draft card, not a constructed card. Moving on to Blade of Shared Souls, 2 mana for an equipment. Again, it says the 4 Mirrored mechanic, which is a mechanic where the equipment comes pre-attached to a 2/2 creature. Whenever it becomes attached to a creature, for as long as it remains attached to it, you may have it become a copy of another creature you control. This is kind of like a weird take on the clone your own stuff cards. And the problem is the clone your own stuff cards, they just aren't very good. Honestly, being able to clone your opponent's things is the thing that gets you back into a game. Whereas if you're behind, cloning your own stuff is not very good. The fact it's a 2/2 is kind of cool, and you can, like, redo it is kind of cool, I guess, as well. But for constructed, this card's a no-go. In limited, this card's certainly reasonable, where it's going to be your best creature most of the time. You can equip it, move it around, so on and so forth, which is kind of cool. But I think overall, the one draw to clone your own creature cards is playing them with cards like Collect the Company or Aether Vial or whatever, and this can't even do that. So definitely not a constructed card, but pretty fine limited card, I think. It's reasonable. Up next is Blue Sun's Twilight Blue X Sorcery. There's one of these for every color, of course. They're all X spells, I think. Gain control of our creature of mana value X or less. If X is 5 or more, make a copy of that creature. A bomb limited card. Absolute bomb limited card. Because this is a kill spell. That's just a 2-for-1. So they have a 3/3 in play. And you just, like, pay 5s, kill it, and then make your own 3/3, which is very, very good. And if you ever cast it for 7 mana, it's insane. Obviously, you can steal a creature and copy it. Game-winning card. So slam dunk, bomb rare, and limited. And constructed, less exciting. Unless there's, like, some really, really high value 1 or 2 mana creatures. So for example, if like there was something on par like Death Shadow in Standard, you know, where some really, really powerful 1-drop it like grows really big. There is Teething Wormlet, which is kind of cool. But you know, and you can pay 2 or 3 mana or 3 or 4 mana to like steal their really good 1 or 2 drop. That can make this card a reasonable sideboard card. It does steal tokens also, which is pretty sweet. So you could steal a Fable token or something like that. But pretty narrow in scope, so probably nothing more than a sideboard card in Constructed. But slam dunk bomb rare limited. Up next is Bring the Ending. No award, but I am really high on this card. I think this card, card's really, really good. So we have 2 mana for an instant Quench. Counter target spell unless they play 2. And we see Make Disappear see a decent amount of play in Constructed right now. And then if your opponent is corrupted, which means they have 3 or more poison counters, this is just actual counterspell. And that's really, really good. Again, the question is, how good will blue be at corrupting people? But imagine you're just like splashing this in your white deck, your white kind of corrupt might deck or whatever. That's pretty powerful, honestly. So it's an easy to cast counterspell. It's going to be, you know, mana leak counterspell a lot early on. Later on, it might be a hard counter. It needs a deck. There needs to be a blue deck that is capable of corrupting your opponent. But if that deck exists, this card's phenomenal. And again, Quench, Make Disappear kind of cards are very close to playable anyway. It doesn't need that much more to make it, you know, make it good. But if you can turn it on, let me tell you. Yeah. And then limited, it's honestly probably a little, I don't know, in limited, like, you're more likely to corrupt them, but the Quench part is so much worse. And again, I'm not sure how toxic the blue decks are, but solid card for sure. Solid card for sure. Definitely a cool one. One to watch. Absolutely. Chrome Prowler, 3 mana for a 3/2 flash when it ETBs. Tap a creature your opponent controls. Limited filler. You know, it's okay. It does play well with the counterspell, obviously, in limited. 3/2 for 3 is fine. Tapping things is fine. Flash is fine. Just like kind of a filler card. It's okay. You know, just it doesn't have toxic. It's an artifact, which is kind of cool for some stuff, but it's okay. Up next is Distorted Curiosity, which is like the A1, B, you know, A2 to the counterspell. This is Divination, but if they're corrupted, it costs 1 blue mana, which is a pretty freaking good deal. So again, it's kind of weird that these 2 cards are in the least toxic color combination, because both these cards are phenomenal if you can turn them on. So once again, you know, Divination is not great by itself. I mean, to be fair, I've top-aided multiple opens playing Divination in my deck, you know, playing Blue Eye Control back in the day, but a little more power creep than that these days. But this thing costs 1, woo boy, and the fail state is not that bad, realistically. So if there's some sort of toxic deck, that counterspell and this card draw spell are going to be a huge part of it, and that's really, really good. So freaking F's in chat for Jace, right? Are you happy or sad that Jace has been corrupted? Happy or sad? That's your YouTube comment of the day. Happy or sad, all caps. What do you think? Happy or sad that Jace has been corrupted? In limited, this card's phenomenal. Divination's already playable in limited, and if you ever cast it for 1, it's insane. Encroaching Mycosynth. 4 mana for an artifact. Non-land permanents you control are artifacts in addition to their other types. The same is true for permanent spells you control and non-land permanent cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. So basically, it's just everything you have as an artifact that are not lands. So you can't do the old March of the Machines trick for artifact lands, which is a thing. But yeah, this is like a weird commander-y, like combo-y card. I don't think you'll ever play this card in a non-combo scenario. Yeah, I don't know, whatever. Escaped Experiments, 2 mana for a 2/1. Whenever it attacks, creature you control gets -X -0 until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control. This is a great 2-drop, honestly. And I think we're seeing a lot of like the blue-white theme being kind of artifact-y. A lot of like artifact matters cards. This card's good. You know, a 2/1 that can shrink creature and attack into stuff is really, really awesome. Makes their blocks bad. And then just worst case, 2/1 for 2, which is fine too. So solid draft card. Obviously, if you're playing on artifacts, but very, very solid card. Experimental Augury. They've taken a lot of cards and just added Proliferate to them. This is Anticipate with Proliferate. And that makes the card a lot better. Anticipate by itself is not very good, but if the Proliferate matters, it's important. And it's important to note also with these, blue doesn't have much toxic stuff. But if you can get that first counter on, you can just Proliferate and just keep adding more counters without even getting into combat, which is kind of cool. So, card's cool. I think it's only playable if you are proliferating for max value, but proliferate's also just a powerful mechanic too. Proliferate adds a counter to anything you have that already has a counter on it. So a +1/+1 counter, a charge counter, obviously an oil counter, a fading counter, whatever, So pretty flexible, honestly. Also can do your opponent's stuff too, although not nearly as important as it was the last time we were in Mirrodin, because in that set there are a lot of -1/-1 counter stuff where you would shrink their stuff, and that's not going to matter that much in this format. But definitely a card that could see play for sure, and then limited probably quite good as well because proliferate's pretty good. Eye of Mallocators. 3 for an artifact. Whenever ETB Scry 2, then whenever an artifact ETBs, it becomes a 4/4 on the turn. This is the kind of card where it doesn't do anything the turn you play it. I don't think it's really good enough. I don't think you're getting enough stuff going on here. Obviously, again, this is kind of like a blue-white artifact matters kind of card. If every card in your deck is an artifact, then sure. If you're going to be able to make us a 4/4 every single turn. But I think that the tapping mana on turn 3 and not have a blocker and a card that might not work it's a little sketchy, honestly. So kind of a fringy playable if like you're hardcore into the artifact deck, but otherwise, yeah. No flying here. Usually these cards fly and they're uncommons. This one is not. So Font of Progress, I'm mana for a blue artifact. ETBs with 2 oil counters on it. 3 mana to make a player mill X cards, where X is the number of oil counters on Font of Progress. Obviously, Millstone by itself, not playable and limited basically at all, unless you're like in like the dirtliest of dirtle fests. But with this card proliferating, you proliferate to 3, proliferate to 4, and now you are milling a decent amount of cards. So if you're like heavily proliferating, this could be interesting, but most mill cards like this aren't very good. I think this is mostly for like a draft deck. I'm sure it'll be an archetype where if you just like have a bunch of proliferate stuff and like 2 or 3 of these in limited, you can just like play no creatures and kill all their stuff and just kill it and mill them out. But pretty fringe. Gonna be a fun build around limited though. Gataxian Anatomist, and whatever. For 4 mana for a 2/5 Phyrexian Wizard, when it ETBs, you may tap it if you do proliferate. Kind of a cool card, honestly, because a 2/5 for 4 is obviously not great, but if you're just in the market for a defensive creature, you can do worse. And then proliferate is a very powerful mechanic, so having the option to do that's kind of cool too. Mostly limited filler, but kind of a cute design. Gataxian Raptor, 3 mana for a 1/4 flyer. ETBs with 3 oil counters on it. Whenever you remove a counter on it from it, you can give it +1 +1/-1. So similar, we see a lot of these like 1/4 flyers with like these like, plus to power minus toughness effects. It's a pretty good one, honestly. No toxic, unfortunately, but this thing blocks pretty well, and then it can attack for a lot if you need it to. If you think of this as like a 2/3 flyer, right, where remove a counter, attack for 2, remove a counter, attack for 2, or block. It blocks very well the turn you play it. It blocks flyers really well, and it plays all proliferate. This card's solid. It doesn't have the upside bonuses that a card like Mistwalker did in Kaldheim, where being a changeling like mattered a lot for other things too. Kind of lacks that. It's not an artifact. It doesn't have toxic, but still a pretty reasonable card, I think. Glistener Seer, mana for a Phyrexian Advisor. Common. It's an 0/3. ETBs with 3 oil counters on it. Remove an oil counter and scry 1. Not very exciting. I think your opponent's playing a bunch of 2/2s. You can play this. It also has the value of your opponents trying to toxic you early with like 1/1s and 2/2s. This blocks all of that. So it does a good job of stopping you from being corrupted. So it could be kind of a sideboard card against those decks, which is kind of cool. But mostly not very exciting. Scrying's okay. Obviously, you can proliferate and keep scrying, but like 1 mana for an 0/3 of its scries is, it's only okay. So my initial impression of this card is that this is a card for the sideboard of your blue decks that are trying not to get toxicked, basically. And sealed, obviously scrying is okay and sealed too. If you're proliferating a ton, or if this just scries every time, sure, that's fine too, but not very exciting. Icar Synthesizer is a 2 mana 1/3. If you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on Synthesizer. As long as there's 4 or more counters on it, it can't be blocked, and it's +2/+0. So that's pretty good, because don't forget that a lot of the non-creature spells are going to proliferate anyway. So you get to like add a counter and then copy it immediately. So this thing will be at 3/3 pretty quickly. And again, a 1/3 for 2 is like decent enough on defense. And again, also stops your opponent from toxicking you early, which is kind of cool. So I think this card's pretty good. If you're super heavy on spells, this card's very reasonable for sure. ickermoon Gauntlet. Did I not? Hold on. Ickermoon Gauntlet. 3 mana 4. No wards. No wards on this one. 3 mana for an artifact. People are like pretty high on this card, but I think it's pretty mopey, honestly. Planeswalkers you control have 0 to proliferate, which is basically +1, obviously. And then -12 to time walk. If you cast a non-creature spell, choose a counter on target permanence, put an additional counter on that kind of permanent. It's a commander card. You know, it's a casual card. I doubt this will have any effect on any format in Constructed at all, because you're playing a 3 mana card that does nothing, and then will eventually do some things. But like, if you're activating a 0 ability on a Planeswalker to proliferate, you're not activating one of the good abilities. I actually had considered this a trap card, the trap card, so that's why I paused on it. I thought it was a trap card, but I didn't mark it. But yeah, just like a whatever kind of like casual, you know, do some cool stuff. You know, if I have 5 Planeswalkers in play, cool, I can like ultimate stuff. But as for competitive play and for more serious play, I think this card's kind of you know, just whatever. And then in limited, don't play this card, obviously. Jace, the Perfected Mind. Look at Jace. Turns to the dark side and still wins best in show. I think this card's very interesting. This is a 4/3 mana Planeswalker that has the completed ability, which means you can pay the Phyrexia mana, and if you do, it has 2 less loyalty. So it's a 4 mana Planeswalker for 5 loyalty, or a 3 mana Planeswalker for 2 life and 3 loyalty. The +1 defends itself, so you give +-3/-0. So if there's one creature in play, you can shrink it so they can't attack it. The minus ability is where things get really interesting, though, because I think played at face value, this card it's okay. It's not super great. Target player mills 3. Then if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, you draw 3 cards, otherwise you draw 1. So for the most part, mill 3, draw a card. I think if you're targeting your opponent, you're not very happy. What I think makes this card interesting is when you target yourself. If you're playing a graveyard deck, this card does a lot. This card mills a lot of cards. It can draw cards. And then if you're constantly like playing other self-mill cards, getting a 20 is kind of reasonable also. If this thing ever draws 3, you're way ahead. And this is all on a 3 mana Planeswalker. And we all know how good 3 mana Planeswalkers are, right? So I think this card is pretty awesome. There is a decent amount of graveyard hit in Standard. It's very, very true. But I think this card could see play in Pioneer, in Explorer, Historic. Modern, probably not. But again, I think that the context of this card is that it has potential to be very, very good, but it does need a certain deck to play it for sure. And the ultimate here is target player mills 3 cards X times. So it's also just 4 mana mill 15, which is like can be used offensively or defensively, which is kind of cool too. But I think this card's pretty sweet. Again, this is not just a Planeswalker you jam into any deck. You need to play it in a specific deck, but it is quite powerful. And then in limited, just milling your opponent for 15 is pretty insane, honestly. So this is a great limited card as well, with 40 card deck formats. So great limited card too. But I think this card's cool. Very, very excited to brew with this card. I think this card is very exciting for graveyard decks and does some really, really cool stuff. And yeah, don't sleep on 3 mana Planeswalkers is my advice to you as a Magic player. Moving on. Mallocators, whatever. Watcher. 2 mana for a 1/1 flying vigilance. When it dies, draw a card. It's fine. It's fine. Limited kind of filler, you know. It's an artifact. It's got flying for equipment. It's got an artifact trigger for your artifact stuff. When it dies, draw for sacrifice stuff. Just like a cog in your draft deck. You know, if your draft deck wants this kind of effect, sure, it's fine. Nothing super exciting. I wouldn't take this card super high, I don't think. But if your deck wants it, it's kind of cool, for sure. Meld Web Curator. More absolutely horrifying art. Just like look at it for a second. 4 mana for a 3/4 common. When it ETBs, put an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard top of your library. Limited filler. You know, yeah, you can rebuy a removal spell, but it's not card advantage, you know, and a 3/4 for 4 is pretty mopey. And then like the ceiling is you draw a removal spell next turn, which is like, you know, it's fine, but pretty finicky cards. Limited filler. Meld Web Strider. 5 mana for a 5/5 vigilance vehicle. The ETBs with an oil counter on it. If you remove an oil counter on it, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. This is a pretty cool design. So this is a real payoff for playing a lot of proliferate in your deck. The problem is that you tap 5 mana for something. It needs to affect the board immediately. And if you want to use the oil counter to make it into a 5/5 on defense, now you can't proliferate because there are no oil counters. So I think this card's probably not great because of that. 5's a lot to play. Obviously, you can just crew it as well. But I think this card reminds me a bit of the train from New Capenna, the green train, where like it's got a lot of power and it could work, but it's just not going to play as well as you think it would. So I think this card's kind of honestly. It's an amusing little payoff, but I think the awkwardness of it is a little too awkward. Mercurial Spell Dancer.
It's a trap.
Trap card, folks. We have 2 mana for a 2/1 unblockable, which is fine. Magic's moved past that a little bit these days. If you cast an Augury, just put an oil counter on it. Whenever it deals damage to a player, you may remove 2 oil counters from it. If you do, when you cast your next instant or source spell this turn, copy it. Choose 2 targets for the copy. So this card has an issue with gameplay, right? So when you think about it, similar to how you have to actually cast like that 2 mana white artifact or Weatherlight Completed, this card you need to think about, okay, how is the turn going to play out when I use this card, right? So I cast it on turn 2. It has 0 oil counters. On turn 3, let's say we, play with fire the creature and lightning strike the other creature, get the 2 counters on it, and now we attack and deal damage. We have no mana left over to copy anything. So typically you want to cast your cards before combat to get this thing, whatever. I guess I don't need to like go through, but you want to get the oil counters on before you do it. So now you're looking at a card where you need to cast multiple spells, then attack again the next turn safely, and then cast a spell from your grave. It's just like a bunch of hoops, So and you're locked to playing the card this turn as well. So you're probably going to have to cast your spells to give it the oil counters, and then not have mana to flash back your spells too. And all you have is a 2/1 for 2. So if this card costs 1 blue and is a 1/1, I think we're like off to the races. I think the card's excellent. But I think as a 2-drop, a 2/1 unblockable isn't very exciting. A lot of hoops to jump through for not a lot of payoff. And the reality is, say you do it. You get the oil counters off, you copy your spell, you play a lightning strike, and you copy it. Cool. Was it worth it? Was it really worth it? So I think this card is a little iffy. So Dan in chat says, oddly enough, best in vintage. And that is actually pretty true. You play this on turn 1 of a Mox, play Mox, and then have flashback recall. That's kind of cool. So that's kind of sweet. But yeah, I think this card, it looks like it should be good, but you need to contextualize what is it going to look like in an actual game of Magic, not, a hypothetical scenario just looking at the cards. So, so I think it's okay. I think it's worse than Dreadhorde Arcanist, which is a card that doesn't see much play anyway. So in limited, it's obviously great. A 2/1 unblockable for 2 is already great, and limited this card's phenomenal. 2/1 unblockable for 2 is not worth it. No, that is not a playable card. Has not been a playable card for 10 years. So not very exciting. But yeah, that's trap card. Good draft card though. Good draft card. Moving on to Mesmerizing Dose. Blue 1 enchantment. This is our usual tap enchantment. ETB, tap a creature, doesn't untap. It also proliferates. Good high pick and limited, honestly. It's a removal spell with some value on it, which is great. And that's cool. Good draft card. Mind Splice Apparatus. This is a weird card, folks. 4 mana for an artifact with flash. Beginning of your upkeep, add an oil counter. Instant sorceries you cast cost 1 less to cast for each oil counter on it. Kind of similar to a card like Wilderness Reclamation or like some sort of, card where it makes a lot of mana. The thing is that it might make too much mana because say you have a card that goes blue 2, you can't reduce it past 2, So there is Silver Scrutiny in the format, which is pretty good, honestly. And like negate, essence scatter, casting all those for 1 is great. So there are definitely cool stuff. Calling it a sleeper is sus, and everyone's freaking out about this card. I mean, I don't think everyone's freaking out about it, but I think this card is interesting. I'm not exactly sure what you want to do with it. It is definitely a strange card, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just calling it a sleeper. I'm not really sure. A lot of it is based on Silver Scrutiny. Silver Scrutiny is just a pretty powerful card that isn't quite there, and this card helps you do that, which is great too. So I think this card's sweet. Constructed, obviously not, but interact in the first few turns, kill some stuff, end step this on turn 4, untap, and all your cards are great, and go from there. Is that good enough? I don't really know, honestly. But it's kind of cool with Urza also, because Urza is like a redundant effect to make your spells cost cheaper, and then makes this cost cheaper too, which is kind of cool. So if you go Urza on turn 3, you could in theory go like Apparatus, Essence Scatter on turn 4 or something like that, which is kind of cool. So I don't know. It's kind of cool. Kind of a cool card. I think it could see play. And Sleeper, not really sure. The potential is there though. And limited, don't play this card. Simple as that. Moving on to Minor Misstep, not Mental Misstep. Minor Misstep, 1 blue. Counter spell mana value 1 or less. This is obviously an important card for older formats. Countering Cascade cards, Aether Vial, Ragavan, whatever. Obviously, the kind of card's much worse on the draw. Because on the play, you hit everything. On the draw, you wish you had Spell Snare. So that's kind of a thing. But for older formats, this is a big deal. Legacy, Vintage, maybe Modern. Mostly probably a sideboard card, and then at its highest value against Cascade cards that cost 0, and so on and so forth. So remember, counter things cost 1 or less, very important. But yeah, it's obviously not Mental Misstep, a card that's banned in every format because that card was an absolute mistake, but not a bad card. In limited, don't play this card. In standard, probably not play this card either. Prologue to Phyrexia, 2 mana 4, an instant. Kind of a cute one here. So blue doesn't get many toxic creatures, but they can just give you a poison counter directly. So 2 mana instant, each opponent gets a poison counter, draw a card. This is the card that gets you going, because you got to get that first counter on to make Proliferate do anything. But once it's on, then you can Proliferate and kind of keep going nuts here. So kind of a cool card, honestly. Obviously 2 mana cantrip has a pretty low bar anyway, which is kind of cool. So a cool limited card. Constructed, probably not. I think if you're trying to play cards like this to turn on your counter spell and your card draw spell that want your opponent to be corrupted, it's not really there, but it's a cool card. That is true. This is a kill condition with 1,000 Year Storm. It's kind of fun, but yeah. So kind of cool. And again, poison counters are counters given by toxic creatures. If your opponent has 10 or more poison counters, they lose the game, which is kind of cool. So in limited, definitely a cool card. Constructed, probably not. But Quicksilver Fisher. Shit.
Somebody's playing a prank on me.
Bombin Common. Forget the music. Bombin Common. My bad. I now screwed this card up twice. But Fisher. It's funny because there's a lot of blue cards. It's a minor misstep. There's a lot of blue commons that seem like they could be best in show. There wasn't really any blue common that like jumped out at me. I'm not best in show. Bombin Common for limited. But this card's pretty reasonable. Obviously, a 4/3 flyer for 5. ETB, loot away a land, which is kind of cool. It's just a solid curve topper, honestly. The counts against this card are that it is not a artifact. It doesn't have toxic. It doesn't really play with any of the mechanics in a set. It's kind of just a raw rate card. And I think it would honestly be better if it was a 3/4. But yeah, I don't know. It's not great. It's fine. It's a solid card. A lot of the blue commons are weird and they're hard to quantify, so I could be wrong here. But I don't know. Whatever. That's my Bombin Common for blue. I'm not super confident on, honestly. Reject Imperfection. Blue 1 instant. Cancel. If a spell's mana value is 3 or less, Proliferate. So another Proliferate card here in blue, but just keep adding Proliferate to all these blue cards that are already kind of mediocre. Again, this one feels a little less important because it's harder to play. I feel like the card draw spell and the quench spell are cards you can splash in like your green deck or your white deck, whereas this card requires more commands of blue, which is kind of tough. So I think this one's kind of iffy, honestly. Cancel's not very good in general anyway, so kind of a miss. In limited's okay, I guess, but I think it's just kind of iffy. Serum Snare. Not Serum Visions, not Spell Snare. 2 mana for an instant. Bounce permanents, which understand. Permanent mana value 3 or less, Proliferate. So again, we're seeing just a bunch of okay blue cards, just adding the word Proliferate to it. Yeah, it's a bounce spell. I don't know. Bounce spells aren't particularly great. It's okay. It's alright. Tamios Immobilizer, 4 mana for an artifact, uncommon. ETB with 4 oil counters on it. Tap, move an oil counter, tap something. This card is pretty damn good. Icy Manipulator is a fantastic card in limited. And this card having no activation cost is awesome. 4 oil counters is a lot. And then so many of the blue cards proliferate. You'll be adding more to this thing pretty easily as well. This is just like an Icy, basically. An Icy with no activation cost, which is insanely good in limited. So phenomenal limited card. Constructed, no. But absolutely phenomenal limited card. Very, very high pick. Even without any proliferate at all, this card's still pretty good. But with any proliferate at all, this card's excellent. Very, very good. Great limited card. Tamios Logbook, the mana for an artifact. Pay 6 mana, tap, draw a card. Has affinity for artifacts, so costs 1 less for each artifact you control. This card's pretty good. You know, if you're like the artifact deck in Limited, and you're going to have, you know, a number of artifacts in play, you play this at some point, and then later in the game, you start drawing cards. It's kind of clunky, honestly. Probably better sealed card. I guess like 6 is a lot. So like if you need to have probably 4 artifacts in play to make this card reasonable. This card's pretty. I guess that's a lot. I was kind of viewing it as 5, not 6. But it's each other artifact you control. It does not count itself. If it counted itself, it'd be great. But it's probably just too clunky. Probably more of a sealed card, honestly. The kind of card where you should know if your deck wants this card, because it's only going to be good in decks that are very, very slow or kind of grindy. But yeah, it's not super great. Not super great. Tikkathul, I guess. Inquiry Dominus is the blue Dominus. 4 mana for a 3/5 flyer, which is pretty good, honestly. It's a pretty good rate. If you would proliferate twice instead. So kind of a narrow ability, honestly. Like, you know, proliferate is definitely a thing, but not a thing you can really build your deck around totally. So it's like, it's an okay ability. And it has the ability Phyrexia mana 1. Remove 3 counters from among artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers you control, and put a counter on it, which is also difficult too. So the reality is this card, the body is quite good. Actually, at Limited, this is a phenomenal Limited card on body alone. The ability itself is, it's okay. It's not particularly exciting. Difficult to give the counter for Indestructible, and then just not the most exciting card overall. This card requires other cards to do stuff, and the proliferate cards aren't the most exciting cards either anyway. So, you know, great Limited card. Probably won't get there constructed. Cool commander card. Hummingbird returns!
Just, our hero returns.
Hummingbird's back. This card's great. This last time around, this card was great. I imagine this card will be great this time as well. Cheap flyer, proliferates. Might as well have toxic once you get that first counter on there. It definitely does a little less than it did last time, because in the last time this card was legal, there were a lot of -1/-1 counter stuff, which is a lot better to proliferate, obviously. So a little worse than last time, but still a very solid card, I think. Going to be a good draft card, not playable constructed, but good draft card, somewhat deck dependent. Transplant Theorist, 4 mana for a 2/4 uncommon. Whenever it or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card if you do discard a card, so it has looting effect. Pay 2, put a card from the bottom of your graveyard in the bottom of your library. So this is just like the super long game. You know, like it's better than a lot of these cards have been lately, where this is often like a 5 mana 2/5 or whatever, where if you are in a super long game, you can recycle your cards and like not deck or whatever. But for the most part, it's just 2/4 that loots. It's cool that it loots itself also. But, you know, it's just an okay card, honestly. Nothing super exciting. A little bit fillery, you know. And then if you're playing a super long game deck that doesn't want to deck, sure. But overall, Trawler Drake, the mana for a 0/0 flying. ETBs with an oil counter on it. Plus +1 for each oil counter on it. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a counter on it. This card's good. Because you play your first non-creature spell, it's already a 2/2, which is reasonable. But most of your non-creature spells are going to proliferate anyway. So this thing can get pretty big pretty fast, I think. Definitely the kind of card where like it's somewhat deck dependent, which is cool. But yeah, I think this card is a good, very good draft card. Going to be exceptional in some draft decks and solid in others. Good draft card. Grand Metatect. Blue 1 for a 2/4. Other blue creatures you control have... Other creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. Other artifact creatures you control can +1/+1. Pay a Phyrexia mana until end of turn target creature you control becomes blue artifact in addition to its other types. Activate only as a sorcery. We're not far enough in the set review to have to make sense of a card like this. Alright. So we have a 2/4/3, which is fine. Looting whenever your blue creatures become tapped is like also, I mean, just fine, I guess. Pumping your artifact creatures is pretty good too. Obviously a very good draft card. I don't necessarily think you want a Lord that costs blue. And I don't think the ability is particularly great either. Just a lot of words that don't really add up to much. Honestly, like, sure, this card's like, okay, it's a good draft card for sure. But, like, I don't know what deck would ever want this constructed. Moving on. To the Retrofitter here. They meant it for a 2/3 toxic creature. I think this is the only blue toxic creature so far. It's an uncommon. Whenever ETBs, an artifact you control becomes a artifact creature base power is 4/4 for as long as it's in the battlefield. This card's great. This card's very, very good. Usually this card's like a 1/3. This card is an excellent, excellent draft card. Honestly, I would say this card's almost closely constructed. A 2/3 for 3 that makes a 4/4 out of like a random token or 1/1 token or whatever is pretty freaking good. And having Toxic one's kind of nice too. Great limited card. Great limited card. And then constructed, maybe fringe playable, probably not. You can animate vehicles, which is kind of cool. You can animate just random tokens, blood. So make a blood on turn 1, make it a 4/4 on turn 3 is pretty cool too. So I think this card's very good. Outside shot constructed, and then great limited card. Vivisurgent's Insight, 5 mana for a sorcery, draw through proliferate. Man, come on!
Look how they mess with my boy.
I'm the biggest Jason's Ingenuity fanboy in the whole world. This couldn't be an instant. It's bullshit. But as far as top end cards for limited go, you know, if you need to draw cards in your deck, this card's okay. 5 mana is a lot to have to not affect the board. So I'd want to be a pretty controlling deck with a lot of kill spells to play this card in limited. But it's definitely an okay limited card. The Sorcerer Speed really hurts it. But 3 cards is a lot. So, yeah. And then we have Watchful Blister Zoa. 6 mana for a 4/4 flyer. ETBs with an oil counter on it. And whenever it dies, you draw cards for the number of oil counters on it. This card's good. This card's very good. A 4/4 for 6 flying that draws a card when it dies is already pretty solid. And if you can proliferate once or twice, this card is excellent. So, great curve topper and limited. Can't have too many of these, but, you know, the first or second 6 drops would be great. Very solid card. Like it a lot. Good draft card. Little matrix art direction here as well. And that's it. So, Retrofitter Blue. To recap, Jace is our best in show. Mind Splice Apparatus is our sleeper card. Our trap card is Mercurial Spelldancer. And then Quicksilver Fisher is our best in show. Our bomb. I screwed up again. Our Bombin Common, which I'm not very confident, honestly, now that I'm looking back on it. But that's okay. That's okay. Blue is all done. Moving on to black. YouTube folks, love you. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on how wrong I am and fill those comments up, all right?